Questions during the session are only possible if you have a small or informal session of no more than around 25 or 30 members. If you're totally comfortable with your subject, then by all means, tell your audience that they can ask questions during the session. Be careful that the questions asked don't steer you off the topic or that you don't get sidetracked from your planned structure. If you said at the beginning of the session that there will be questions at the end, then you must allow time for that. Knowing how to handle questions can be quite challenging, particularly if you have difficult, arrogant or aggressive members of the audience. Here are some tips on answering questions. Tip number 1, watch your body language. That means don't cross your arms. Crossing your arms will make you look closed off or uncomfortable and defensive and will not invite questions. You have to know how to invite questions. If you look comfortable with your arms down by your side, you will also look confident. All you have to do is simply ask, who has the first question? This is an open-ended way of asking for questions, whereas if you say, are there any questions? It may imply that you are not expecting questions. Tip number 2. It's important to set yourself a time limit for questions, so make sure that your audience knows right from the start how many minutes you've set aside for question time. Tip number 3. Limit questions to 1 question per person. Some people may want to monopolise on question time, so to be fair to everyone, allow only 1 question per person. Tip number 4, if you're not sure exactly what a question means, ask the person questioning. You can say something like, so are you asking if, and then ask the question in your own words. Or you could paraphrase it in this way. So what you're asking me is, and ask the question. Remember, never say, that's a good question. That could imply that the other questions weren't very good or that you actually don't know how to answer it. So what do you do if you don't know the answer? It's okay. Don't be afraid to admit that you don't. One way to handle this is to say that you will find out and make sure you get back to the individual and the group as soon as you do. You can do this by emailing the answer out once you have found out. Or if you have another session within a week or so, you can also say, I will answer it at the next session. There is nothing to stop you from asking a member in the audience whether they know the answer to the question. This gets the rest of the audience involved and can bring up some interesting points. Another way is to turn it back to the person asking the question, depending on what the question is. You could respond by saying something like, what would your opinion be? Or, what would you do in this instance? Tip number 5, if the question is irrelevant, don't feel that you have to answer. Say, let's just stick to the questions relating to our topic. If you don't feel comfortable answering a question, especially if it's a political question, you don't have to feel that you have to answer it. Just simply say, I would prefer not to comment on that. Tip number 6. If it's a question that requires a long or drawn-out explanation, then tell the individual that this is a question that will require an in-depth answer, which will take a lot longer than we have time for today, and say, I would be happy to discuss this with you and anyone else who may be interested after this session.